Hi, my name is Ethan, and I'm 29 years old, the middle child in what my mom used to proudly call the Whitaker Trio, which made us sound way more functional than we actually were. My older brother Dylan is 33, and my younger sister Maddie is 25. Growing up, Dylan was the favorite son for one simple reason. He was loud, dramatic, and mom interpreted chaos as leadership potential. Meanwhile, I was the one actually sweeping the floors, helping with bills when dad got sick, running errands, tutoring Maddie through algebra, and basically being the quiet background employee of the household. Think of me as the emotional support golden retriever of the family. But underpaid and without health care. Mom and I have worked in child protective services for years. I joined at 23. She's been there for 3 decades. And somewhere around year 5, I stopped being shocked by the fact that the people who scream the loudest about being good parents are usually the ones who forget their kids in a locked car with the engine running because they just ran in for a minute. Dylan is not subtle, and he doesn't handle responsibility well. He had 2 kids with his ex wife, Lily, who eventually left because, and this is a direct quote, I need a partner, not a third toddler. Their kids, Ella 7 and Mason 5, are great, genuinely sweet. They get their personalities from their mother's side, which is probably why Dylan constantly complains that they're too sensitive. He says that as if sensitivity were a malfunctioning appliance. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I moved in with Dylan temporarily because my apartment building had a mold problem and the remediation was taking longer than a tax return. I paid half the rent, half utilities, bought my own groceries, and even helped with the Wi Fi bill that he kept forgetting. But according to him, the moment I moved in, he became the sole breadwinner supporting the whole family, and I was now part of his imaginary childcare staff. I wasn't just living with him, I was apparently living off him. He'd started a new job at a warehouse. Good pay, benefits, predictable schedule. I was genuinely happy for him. But within 1 week, he decided this new job had transformed him into the CEO of household operations, and I had been automatically assigned the role of free babysitter number one. He started leaving the kids in front of my bedroom door with no warning. Not knocking, not texting, literally just dropping them like Amazon packages and calling over his shoulder, Bro, be useful. It was extra ironic because we split bills down the middle, and I cooked almost every dinner. He'd also invented a narrative where he paid for everything, even though I had detailed spreadsheets proving otherwise. I even color-coded the expenses. At one point, he looked at a sheet that showed I paid more that month and said, Yeah, but emotionally I pay more. I still don't know what he meant. Now here's the part where the universe tossed him into the deep end without floaties. This morning, I was already dressed for work, at CPS, when Dylan barges into my room without knocking, holding both kids by their wrists like they were malfunctioning toys. He mutters something about being late and needing me to step up. Then, in a move I still can't quite believe, he literally places the kids on the living room floor, goes, Finally, you're useful, and sprints out the door like he's escaping a crime scene. He forgot 2 very important things. I was supposed to be at work. I work for CPS, the agency that investigates exactly this kind of parental stupidity. And yes, he definitely forgot the second part. Dylan's brain only stores information that directly benefits him, like Black Friday sale dates or which gas station sells the good taquitos. When I saw Ella and Mason on the floor with no lunch packed, no instructions, no nothing, I called my supervisor to tell her I'd be late. She asked why. I told her. She said, Oh, honey, that is work. She sent a team. 2 hours later, CPS was in our living room, while the kids ate the sandwiches I made them. The workers didn't treat me any differently, which was good. But they absolutely raised eyebrows when I explained that Dylan had been increasingly dumping childcare on me, leaving the kids unsupervised and then trying to guilt trip me with lines like, You don't understand the pressures of being a single dad, while I'm literally sitting there with cases of actual endangered children in my inbox. By noon, The kids were safely placed with their mom pending a fuller assessment. She was calm and relieved. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Dylan had been creative with childcare. By 4 p.m., I had 67 missed calls and 23 angry texts, my favorite of which said, "Bro, WTF, I trusted you to take care of my family." His family, the kids he abandoned on laminate flooring, the kids who weren't even supposed to be in my care that morning. The same morning he yelled at me last week for using too much electricity, even though it turned out he left the dryer running for 6 hours because he forgot he put one sock in there. But here's the plot twist with comedic timing. When he finally stormed home demanding to know why CPS kidnapped his children, our mom walked out of the kitchen holding her staff badge because she had arrived to check on me. He froze. His face went through 7 different emotions, none of them intelligent. She said, "Dylan, sweetheart, they didn't get taken. They got protected. There's a difference." Then she added, "You've always thought responsibility was optional. Turns out it's not. I have never seen a grown man shrink like he was being vacuum sealed. The fallout did not hit like a single explosion. It came in waves, each one more chaotic than the last. If the original incident was the moment the match hit the gasoline, the aftermath was the slow, steady realization that the fire had spread a lot farther than Dylan ever anticipated." The first sign of trouble arrived the morning after CPS removed the kids to stay with their mother. I woke up to 46 notifications, all from my brother, all variations of accusations, threats, and emotional theatrics typed with the frantic energy of someone who sets their kitchen on fire and blames the stove. He insisted that I had betrayed him, ruined his life, ruined the kids' lives, and worked with mom to sabotage his parenting, just because we were jealous that he had a job with benefits. According to him, I had orchestrated an elaborate setup, one that apparently involved waking up early, dressing for work, sitting in my room pretending to be unavailable, and then calling CPS on my own nephew and niece so I could go to work 10 minutes late. His theory required me to have superhuman foresight and the ability to control time, space, and his calendar, because he forgot that I had no idea he planned to dump the kids that morning. He did not text me directly. He posted all of this on social media. He wrote rambling paragraphs about how he trusted family and family stabbed him in the back. His friends from high school responded with confused emojis and comments like, "That does not sound right," which only made him more paranoid. Then the complaint arrived. It came through the official system, flagged by a supervisor who called my mother first to give her a heads up so she could maintain appropriate separation from anything involving a conflict of interest. My supervisor handed it to another manager, who handed it to an external investigator because CPS follows strict procedures. Once a complaint is filed, the agency does not get to shrug and ignore it. It gets processed, it gets reviewed, it gets documented. The funniest part was the wording. Dylan claimed I had set him up. Those were his exact words. He insisted that I intentionally tricked him into leaving the kids because I wanted to make him look like a bad father. He also claimed I was jealous of him, which is truly impressive considering I am not the one who lost 2 jobs in 2 years because I kept showing up late due to morning vibes not lining up. Once the investigator got assigned, she called me to schedule an interview. I had nothing to hide, so I told her everything and provided all relevant information. She took notes. She asked for timestamps. She asked whether anyone else had been present at the time. I told her the truth. The only people present that morning were me, the kids, and my brother's massive sense of misplaced confidence. Then came the part that detonated Dylan's narrative from orbit. The investigator asked if there was any video footage. I said I had no cameras in my private spaces, but the apartment itself had cameras installed last year because Dylan wanted to catch package thieves. He installed them in the living room and at both exterior entrances. He had bragged about the cameras for months, telling everyone that he was finally taking security seriously, even though we lived in a neighborhood so safe that people left strollers on porches overnight. I gave the investigator access to the feed he controlled through his cloud account. She asked him for permission and he gave it, probably thinking he could spin the footage or argue about context. He had no idea how damning it would be. I was not present for the viewing, but the investigator later summarized what she saw during her conversation with me. According to her, the living room camera captured everything. It showed Dylan dragging both kids by their wrists like he was transporting malfunctioning robots. It showed him dropping them directly onto the floor in full view of the camera. It showed him yelling something about me being useful. It showed him sprinting out the door without even glancing toward my hallway. The video did not support his complaint, it completely obliterated it. But the best part was the audio. When the investigator replayed the footage for him during his interview, he tried to defend himself by saying that I was in the house. Therefore, the kids were supervised. The investigator asked if he confirmed that before leaving. He answered that I usually am. She paused, and there was a very long silence. Then she told him that was not a parenting plan. She said it with the calmness of someone who has delivered this exact sentence to dozens of irresponsible adults. She said it with zero dramatic flair, zero judgment, just a neutral observation that sliced through him like a scalpel. It was surgical. It was perfect. He reacted exactly how you would expect a man who has never been held accountable to react. He tried to argue. He tried to claim I had influenced the investigation. He tried to claim the camera angle was misleading. He tried to claim the footage did not show the full story. He tried so many excuses that the investigator reportedly had to remind him repeatedly to let her finish her questions. When I later heard the summary of everything he said, I felt my face heat up with secondhand embarrassment. His downfall was entirely self-inflicted, but he behaved like a man discovering consequences for the first time and deciding he did not like them. My mother found out about the complaint when she returned home from work and saw the look on my face. She did not need details to know Dylan had escalated things. She let out a long breath, sat down at the kitchen table, and pressed her palms together like someone preparing to pray. She did not say she was disappointed. She did not say she was surprised. She simply looked exhausted in the way only a woman who has parented 3 very different children and worked 30 years in CPS can look exhausted. The next day, the investigator emailed me a transcript of her findings for my records. It was thorough. It was objective. It confirmed that nothing in Dylan's complaint had merit. It also confirmed, in writing, that the footage clearly contradicted his claims and demonstrated neglect on his part. At work, the staff who were aware of the situation maintained professional neutrality, but several gave me sympathetic glances that felt like small emotional hugs. A couple of them had dealt with their own family members doing similar things. One coworker told me that family conflict involving CPS always gets messy because people panic when confronted with their own behavior. But documentation never lies. It was comforting in a bleak, bureaucratic way. Dylan continued to spiral. He left angry voicemails demanding that I admit I orchestrated everything. He said I betrayed the family. He said Mom was choosing me over him. He said CPS was corrupt. He said the investigator was biased. He said the cameras glitched. He said the kids lied. He said the universe was out to get him. It was a rotating carousel of blame, and he rode every horse. Meanwhile, Lily kept the kids calm. She sent me a text saying they were doing fine and playing in her backyard. Ella had drawn a picture of a house with a smiling sun. Mason was building a pillow fort. They were stable. They were safe. They were content. My brother was the only one drowning. Eventually, the investigator wrapped everything and formally closed his complaint with the finding that his claims were unsubstantiated and contradicted by his own security footage. When she sat down with him to explain the final report, she made him re-watch the camera footage one last time. She asked him again why he left the kids without notifying the adult responsible for them. He said he thought I was in the house. She asked him whether he checked. He answered that he assumed I was. She told him that assumptions do not replace communication, and that no reasonable person would consider that a responsible handoff of childcare. When I heard that final part, I had to cover my face and bite the inside of my cheek. The image of him sitting in front of a screen, watching himself sprint out the door like someone with a firecracker taped to his leg, while an investigator calmly dismantled every excuse he had produced, was too much for me to handle without losing composure. I had to turn away so no one would see me laughing. After the complaint was officially closed and Dylan's attempt to rewrite the laws of physics, childcare, and common sense collapsed under the weight of his own security footage, things became strangely quiet for a day. Not peaceful quiet, more like the eerie stillness you get right before a storm rolls in. Dylan stopped calling. He stopped texting. He stopped posting rants online. It was not a sign of growth or reflection. It was the kind of silence that made me imagine him pacing around his living room, building a conspiracy board out of thumbtacks and string, trying to find a way to blame me, the mailman, the economy, and possibly solar flares for the fact that consequences had finally pulled up a chair and introduced themselves. While he was busy stewing in whatever dramatic episode he had scheduled for himself, the rest of the world kept moving. And, ironically, it was his ex-wife Lily who ended up being the calmest presence in all this. Lily is one of those people who gives off a steady, grounded energy even when the entire room is vibrating with chaos. She has had to develop that skill because she spent years trying to co-parent with my brother, a man whose relationship with responsibility is casual at best and adversarial at worst. I always liked her. She treated me with respect even when she was done with Dylan. She never involved me in their arguments. She never made the kids pick sides. She kept things civil because she cared more about stability than pride. Last night she called me. It was late enough that most people would hesitate before dialing a number. I had just sat down on the couch with a mug of tea, trying to decompress from a week that felt like a marathon through a bureaucratic obstacle course. When I saw her name appear on my phone, I felt a brief clip of anxiety, not because I ever worried she would blame me, but because I did not know what emotional shape things had taken on her end. When I answered, her voice sounded tired but clear, like someone who finally had room to breathe. She started by apologizing for the chaos. Oh, it was not her fault. But she did it anyway because she has always tried to make things easier for everyone around her. She said she was calling to thank me. She explained that the incident with Dylan opened a door she had been trying to push for months. She had spent so long documenting his inconsistency, his impulsive decisions, his unreliable childcare arrangements, and the times he returned the kids late because he lost track of time. She had been trying to get the court to enforce their custody agreement with actual structure rather than vague guidelines that left too much space for him to improvise. This incident, as she put it, gave the court something solid and indisputable, not speculation, not opinion, not he said, she said. Actual recorded evidence of negligence from a camera he installed himself. She sounded relieved when she told me that the judge agreed to update the custody agreement to emphasize stability, predictability, and designated supervision. She said it was the first time she felt like the legal system acknowledged what she had been saying all along. The kids deserved a safe, consistent environment, not one where they had to hope their father remembered to tell an adult before running out the door. Then she told me something that caught me off guard. She said she used to warn Dylan that one day my job would collide directly with his behavior. She said she had told him many times that I took my work seriously, that I understood the weight of responsibility, and that I would never compromise ethics just to protect someone from the consequences of their own choices. She said Dylan always dismissed her warnings with the same line, that Ethan would never report him because Ethan was too chill. It took me a moment to process that. In Dylan's mind, being chill meant being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available, and endlessly willing to set myself on fire to keep his chaos warm. He interpreted my quiet personality as a weakness, a resource, or a convenience he could exploit indefinitely. He never understood that chill does not mean spineless, and patience does not mean servitude. He assumed I would always bend. He was shocked when he finally found the point where I did not. Lily told me that when she heard what happened, she felt two emotions at once. Relief that the kids were finally protected in a formal, enforceable way, and a little bit of sadness, because it confirmed something she had learned the hard way while married to him. Dylan only listens to consequences. Words bounce off him like rubber balls. Reality hits him like a brick wall. She also said something that made me laugh out loud into the phone. She told me she had stopped by Starbucks earlier that day and grabbed me a gift card. She said she figured I needed it more than anyone after the week I had. She said that even though she could not fix the situation, the least she could do was fuel the person who had been unwillingly drafted into her ex-husband's circus. When I picked up the card from her mailbox this morning, I found she had written a note inside the envelope. It was short and simple. She said she appreciated me. She said the kids adored me. She said what happened had been a long time coming, and that in a strange way, Dylan had created his own disaster and revealed his own flaws without anyone else lifting a finger. She ended her note by writing that I deserved a break and that no one needed caffeine more than the man who accidentally delivered his brother straight into accountability. She is correct. If I thought the situation had peaked at the complaint being disproven by his own cameras, I underestimated the universe's commitment to poetic symmetry. The next phase hit Dylan in the one place he had always believed himself untouchable: his parental authority. The court reviewed everything, including the footage, the investigator's notes, and Lily's documentation going back months. They decided that if Dylan wanted to maintain even his current level of visitation, let alone expand it, he needed to complete a structured parenting course designed for adults who fundamentally misunderstand supervision, consistency, and communication. When Mom heard the court's decision, she did not gloat. She did not say, "I told you so." She took on the tone she always used when addressing Dylan during his childhood tantrums, which was the perfect blend of sternness and carefully measured sympathy. She sat him down and convinced him that if he wanted any chance at expanded visitation later, he had to take the requirement seriously. The alternative was losing time with his kids, and even Dylan understood that line could not be crossed without consequences he could not undo. So he enrolled. The irony was astronomical. He had to sit through classes taught by people I work with, people who have dedicated their lives to improving parenting outcomes, people who regularly see worse cases than his, yet still reserve enough patience to teach grown adults that children are not self-operating furniture. The universe has a talent for placing mirrors in front of people who spend years avoiding them. And karma was not finished. On his first day, one of the instructors recognized his last name. She had apparently heard stories from me at work over the years, the harmless kind you share during lunch breaks. The stories about being the middle sibling in a family where one child absorbed all the gravity in the room, and the others simply orbited around him. She put the pieces together instantly. She looked at him, tilted her head, and said that he must be Ethan's brother. When he later told me about it, he described it like I had personally written his name on a list of offenders and distributed it across the agency. He looked at me with a betrayed expression, as if I had plotted the whole situation from the beginning. In his mind, I had dragged him into the exact network of professionals who understood precisely what he had done, and I had done it on purpose. The truth was far less cinematic. He did it to himself. All I ever did was tell the truth. While he began his slow and uncomfortable education and accountability, I moved forward with my own life. My apartment finally passed inspection. The mold was gone, the walls were redone, and the air quality tested clean. I packed my things with a level of relief that felt physical. Every box sealed was one more weight off my shoulders. Living with Dylan had become like living in a smoke-filled room. Eventually, you forget what clean air feels like until you step outside. Moving day itself was quiet. Tense, but quiet. Dylan hovered in the doorway while I carried out my last load. He had the posture of someone who knew he should apologize but could not quite lower his pride enough to do it. Instead, he relied on theatrics. As I grabbed my keys, he looked at me and said that I was abandoning my family. He delivered the line with the same melodramatic tone he used in childhood when he claimed someone had stolen his dessert after he accidentally sat on it. I told him I could not abandon something I had never agreed to be in charge of. He did not like that answer. He muttered that he fed this family. I glanced at the fridge, the same fridge I had stocked for months, and found 2 mustard bottles, an expired container of hummus, and something that resembled cheese but had become a science project. I gestured toward the barren shelves and told him to enjoy feeding everyone with his imagination. Then I closed the door behind me. The moment the latch clicked, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was the kind of lightness that comes from shedding obligations you never signed up for, the kind of clarity that only arrives when you walk out of someone else's storm and back into your own sunlight. 2 hours later, Mom texted me. She had sent a screenshot of a message Dylan had sent her, complaining that the house felt too big and too quiet without someone to help. He wanted sympathy. He wanted validation. He wanted someone to tell him that losing his built-in free assistant was unfair. Mom's reply was perfect. She told him that what he felt was responsibility, plain and simple. For the next few days, the house stayed quiet. He still had his classes, he still had his check-ins, he still had the reality of a court order reminding him that parenting is not optional. Meanwhile, I settled into my apartment, unpacked my books, and discovered that the simple act of placing my own groceries in my own fridge felt like reclaiming ground I had not realized I had lost. Lily kept me updated. The kids were doing well. Ella had started a new art project. Mason was going through a phase where he named all his stuffed animals after planets. They were steady, they were safe, they were thriving with structure. Mom checked in on me too. She told me she was proud of me for choosing boundaries over guilt. She said it was an adult skill many people never master. She did not say Dylan's name, but she did not have to. Weeks passed. Dylan finished the first portion of his parenting course. He had not become a new man, but he had quieted. He had softened, even if only a little. Having to sit in a classroom while professionals explained the importance of communication and supervision forced him to confront versions of himself he had avoided. The kids eventually resumed a consistent visitation schedule. This time, it came with oversight, structure, and zero ambiguity. Dylan followed the rules because he understood that the price for ignoring them was higher than his ego could afford. Life settled back into something resembling normal. Not the old normal, where I lived in his chaos. A new normal, where he was finally responsible for himself, and I was no longer carrying the weight of his expectations. Sometimes responsibility arrives as a gentle correction. Sometimes it arrives as a tidal wave. Dylan got the wave. I got the tide going out, taking his debris with it and leaving me with a beach finally worth walking on. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life belonged completely to me again.